and welcome to the Open Air Podcast. My name is Devang and Mert. I am not joined by Simon Bushel because we gave him a well-deserved weekend off, but fear not, fearless listener. Very lucky to have friend of the show, Open Air, I would say an OG, Mert Ertunga, joining us today to talk about basically everything that's going on in tennis in general, but also maybe the best tennis Twitter feed I've seen in terms of actually not being terrible about observing the sport and appreciating and acknowledging the good things to have. So with that opening salvo, welcome to the show.
Thank you, guys. Glad to be here, regular listener to you guys, and I'll send you the champagne for that nice intro about me. Thank you.
Of course. So I did some homework before, and I if you don't know Mert and his background, I think this is one of the more fascinating people to talk about in terms of tennis because of where you've been and where you've come from. But I know the story, Mert, but I do want to ask you about the road as a youngster playing in Istanbul, Turkey, and coming up through the ranks and developing this passion for tennis.
Yeah, it's a complicated road because we at the time, at least at the time that I was playing, we had a total number of 0 players who were successful in the Pro Tour. So we had 0 guidance, no one to look up to, and no one really to tell us what to do. And I shouldn't have to remind this, but I do find myself reminding this is there's no internet at the time, of course. Mm-hmm. There's no, there's not much TV. You don't get to watch challengers, satellites, or anything of that nature on TV. The only tournaments that were on TV were the very, very big tournaments. And by that, I mean the majors, and not all of them either. And from the quarterfinals or semifinals on. So you are basically striving for something about whose existence you know nothing. And so when I got, and I'm one of the biggest victims of that because when I became number one in Turkey, or a Davis Cup player for the 2 or 3 year period that I was number 1 or 2 in Turkey and played Davis Cup, it was one of these things where I had this game where I was just really fast and got a lot of balls back and frustrated my opponents and won points that way. And I thought I was this just really hot player and I could make it everywhere. I'm winning tournaments in Turkey. And then I decide that I'm going to try it, out there on the satellite circuit. And I go to a few tournaments, and within a year, I realize that there are 800 guys like me out there.
Right.
And then I will not be able to move up unless I develop, some sort of a weapon, a big forehand. I didn't have a big serve. I didn't have a big ground stroke. I did not have much touch in terms of drop shots. I did not have much variety. I was just one of these guys that just sent every ball back. I was super fast. And, but like I said, there were 800 other guys like me out there. But you know how tennis players can be stubborn. So I was stubborn because, that's what got me there.
Mert, what kills me though, is that you clearly were good, but that other level was
so far away from me.
It's a different animal, right?
Yes, exactly. It was so far away from me, and like I said, I decided for a year, no, I'm going to make it with what I got. I won 90% of my matches, so I can still win. But no, it went the other way. So then I decided I'm going to try to develop a weapon. But then at that time, it's going to take a year or two. And came 1992. It turned out that I could go back to my school in the United States and be the assistant coach and get my master's degree paid for that way. And I said, Mert, time to be realistic. Let's go back and do that,
I want to ask you about this because I think you're an interesting person. And I feel like this is possibly the most interesting change and being immersed in the American schooling system, but also becoming a professor and getting a PhD, but also coaching a UAB team that becomes one of the top flight programs in the country. And I want to get to more of the coaching aspect, but how big of a change was that? In terms of not immersing yourself, but also changing the way you look at the game, perhaps.
Sure. Well, Devang, I'll tell you how I made my decision to get to UAB. Back then, I for a couple of years I went to Nick Bolter Tennis Academy
Right.
in
Right.
the mid '80s. This is when Jimmy Arias and Aaron Krickstein were there, and some college coaches were coming to recruit there. And at the time, and the college tennis landscape was nothing like it is today. So I went back in the summer of '85, and I literally opened up a map of the United States, and I had offers from five different schools. And we led an isolated life at Nick Bolter Tennis Academy. So I still didn't know much about the U.S. And I started looking at the map, and I said, "Oh, Birmingham, Alabama.
Mhm.
It's to the south. The weather must be nice." So that's how I ended up going there as a player at first. And then, like you said, my tennis skyrocketed, in the United States because I got to play with so many good players at the same time, which was not the case in Turkey. And I got to watch top juniors in the world at the academy, and then later on in college. And because the access to other matches and to the ATP tour on TV was vast, my whole education about tennis took skyrocketed during that time.
Mhm.
And it's thanks to that when I came back, when I tried to pro, I realized how silly I was, without any guidance, anyone to look up to, or no idea on how the professional tour goes, that I actually launched myself into it, and I was doomed to fail, basically. Let's be honest, or anyone in my position. And so I went back, I went back to the U.S. But to answer your question more specifically, the what the US did for me is give me access visually, education wise, and game wise to a variety of game styles, and open my eyes basically to what the game of tennis had to offer beyond my little world that I was living in before getting out of Turkey.
I mean, that's fascinating. I don't think we give enough credence to the fact that this is such an international game, and the what's expected of people to basically pick up their life and travel to wherever they have to do to continue playing the sport. And I think your journey is one of those where it's underrated and it's kind of not covered as much in the tennis landscape.
Yes, Devang. Also, I think tennis is you touch on a very big topic. So, but I'll just quickly say that if it weren't for tennis, I wouldn't be not half but quarter of the person that I am today. It opened my eyes to many things. You learn how to win, you learn how to lose, you learn how to take responsibility, you learn how to lead your life. You take,
Right.
you experience failures, successes, and you grow from that.
I think it's kind of what and now I'm a fan, and I'm talking about what I like about your analysis of tennis and in general. But I think you take an approach to the game that it has that in the background. It has those ethos as sticking true, and something that you remind yourself of, and that colors the way you watch the game and view the game. And I think there's not many people who do that. And I wonder, like, as a player, you're playing and you can judge yourself, etc. But you move into the coaching role, it's obviously a different aspect, and like you got to judge people, but you can't judge them to the extent where you're denigrating them. You know what I mean? Like it has to be a different animal.
Of course, well, what the first thing you have to accept is that you cannot think the way you were thinking when you were playing yourself. Couple of things about that is that maybe I'm able to get 20 balls back into play, but the player that I'm coaching may not be that consistent. So I can't think on my terms and get mad because he or she's not putting 15 balls back in play. I can, however, demand more in the sense that they may have other weapons that they're not using enough. So you have to start thinking in the scope of your player's game, and try to push them in that sense. And another thing that I learned moving from player to coaching is how important clear communication is. I mean, sometimes you have to communicate with your player and they have to communicate with you like if you're talking to a 3.5-year-old. You cannot just say 2 or 3 sentences and expect what's coming next, that your coach or your player is going to know what you're going to say next. You have to be extremely clear. And this gets lost in the shuffle because when you're a player, you communicate with yourself in your head,
Right.
and you communicate in bits and pieces and little signposts and one word here, one word there, and you know exactly what you mean. But when you're communicating with a player, that's not the way to do it. You actually have to say it out loud and spell it out loud, every single word.
I think that's, I mean, possibly the most fascinating aspect of that dynamic, or trying to splice in like what you think is happening as an outside observer watching on TV, and trying to understand what the relationship there is. But it's really hard to imagine because we're not there, and we're not in that one-to-one conversation all the time. We had a couple questions on the Discord, Mert, about this coaching, and like I think from Josh on the Discord asking, one thing I've been thinking about the Laver Cup is the coaching and what it means to tell someone during a match, do a certain thing different. I found it fascinating. You're watching really good players tell each other what they should do better. I don't think that's a normal thing that we have in tennis. And I think that's one of the more fascinating aspects of the Laver Cup, when you had literal, really, really good players being like, you should change this. Or Novak telling Matteo Berrettini, you know what, you should probably expect the bounce to be higher, and him not really adapting to that. I thought that was the most intricate part.
Yes. The coaching that other players were giving, I agree with you, was fascinating to listen to. Although I didn't hear Borg coaching much, but okay, we'll go past that. But yes, it was super interesting to hear that. The only thing about that, Devang, is they're doing that. They know that they're on TV, correct? So when a player, when Novak tells Berrettini what to do, I would be interested in how Berrettini would respond back if the cameras were not on them.
And he seemed a bit subdued when he heard that, because I feel like Novak had used that against him several times in big matches. Oh.
Yes, that's very possible. He would be fresh in his mind, right? As Novak's saying that, he would remember that right away. But, and then you have some personalities who are stubborn or who like to, push the coach. In other words, why do I have to do that? I tried that 2 games ago. It didn't work. Weren't you watching? You never know, right? I mean, some players get confrontational. Some players are stubborn, or they have pride and they don't want to hear you say, well, you're not doing what's necessary to win. But again, they cannot say that back on TV with everybody watching, especially on an occasion like Laver Cup. So I'm also interested in, you have to know your player's reaction and what they mean. And this is why it's important to spend a little bit of time with the player, before you go into full-time coaching, or at least get to know them. And because you don't want to be coaching in the middle of a match and say something that they find sensitive at 4:30 all in the third set.
And it derails. It derails everything.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's important to get to know your player.
But another Discord question from Luke Veristi. Coaching now is a thing that is, you can do this now, and you can do this openly. In that same vein, how do you think this is going to affect this relationship? Because I feel like a lot of these things are behind closed doors, or they're in training sessions, or they're things that we don't get to see as fans. But now, with them being more prevalent and open, it opens up this avenue for more analysis.
It opens up the avenue for more analysis, but I'm also afraid. I would have preferred that we don't have coaching during the matches. I feel like it's a one-on-one match, and the player's mental toughness or IQ or ability to stay calm in big moments and concoct a point should play a role in how the match turns out. And I think opening it up to coaching at all times takes away from that a little bit. But then again, you can argue, well, coaches were doing it anyway. At least
there were the hand signals and everything else.
That's true. That's true. There's no doubt about that. That's true, but not to the extent where they're saying full sentences to the players either. So it's there was still a bit of a difference. And also, I'm a little bit apprehensive about coaches being that involved during the match. I mean, how do we know, for example, there are many, many languages that coaching is being used in, right? So how do I know that my player, if I have a player who's from the same country as the other player, for example, and the other player's coach is saying stuff to his player, but at the same time, he's also saying stuff to bother my player. How do I know that? Or how does the referee know that? And I just think that
There's levels.
I think there's a lot of it's a can of worm that
Yeah.
can be opened there, and I hope nobody takes that route. But I don't want coaches to have this role where they can affect the opponent by what they say and loud enough to say it to where they can hear it. I don't want that to become a part of the game.
That's I didn't consider that, and I think that's definitely worth examining.
I mean, Devang, for example, if I'm coaching you and I say things like, "Oh, he's choking on his backhand, play there more often," and who controls how loud I say this? Right. And your opponent hears me saying he's choking his backhand. And what if he is really choking it? Then then I'm playing mind games with him by indirectly talking to you. You see, that's kind of just to give you a concrete example.
I think that part of me believes that, like, if you are strong enough mentally, that there's a blocking out portion, or there's you don't listen to the noise. But as a human being, I don't think that's possible. And I think you're going to hear everything that's going on, and that's going to be a massive part of it. I think this is probably one of the more interesting aspects of where the game goes forward, because as an individual sport as they come, there's a bit more of a team aspect going forward. And I think this is kind of harkens back to, like, you basically went back into coaching because you saw a reason to go back into coaching. But I'm curious what led you to that moment.
Well, the times that, I spent 35 years of my life on the tennis court, hours and hours a day, teaching, coaching, or playing myself. And at one point I wanted to get back into education and get a PhD in what I initially wanted to do back when I was a teenager. It's kind of like you want to realize every dream you have in your life. So that's how I got back and got my PhD, defended my dissertation, and I started teaching. But at the same time, one can never stay away from tennis fully. So during the summers, yeah, exactly. During the summers,
it's a sickness, by the way, Mert. It's a sickness.
Exactly.
It sounds like it. Yeah.
You just can't stay. I started watching more tennis than I ever did. Okay, I stayed away from the court, but I started watching more tennis than I ever did. And Tennis Channel came along. Now it was just you had access to everything, and I just became addicted to watching tennis and talking about it with coach friends of mine. We would call each other and talk about the match that we're watching. And then I started writing some articles, and I was writing articles for the largest tennis publication at the time in Turkey. Doing some match analysis, and then every summer starting 2010, we had a coach, actually a legendary coach in Turkey who passed away a couple of years back. He's the only, John Üner is his name. He's the only one to lead a Turkish male player into top 100 in the ATP, and then he went in and took a female player into top 100 in Turkey. So he did it twice, and we never had a player in top 100 in ATP, nor in the WTA until he did it with those two players. They were also the first ones to win rounds in majors. But anyway, he's a very good friend of mine. He was, and because we played together, and every summer he'd say, look, come with me to some tournaments. I'd like a second set of eyes with me. There are not many people that I trust. So you're one of the ones that I trust. So please come and spend some weeks with us, with him and his player. And I did. I did this every summer for 6, 7, or 8 years. And at the same time, I was also attending a couple of big tournaments every summer as media to write articles, because I loved watching tennis up close more than anything. The media credential to be able to watch it up close was something. But that coaching fire kept burning in me because I spent almost 20 years coaching before I went into academics. So throughout those years, and he was always asking me, when are you coming back into coaching? When are you coming back into coaching? We need coaches in Turkey who are able coaches. You're one of them, et cetera, et cetera. And then finally the fire kept burning, and then it increased to the point where I decided that I want to get back into coaching. And that's how that happened.
I don't want to keep pumping your tires because I'm a big fan always, but he got back into coaching and then he ended up coaching some really great Turkish youngsters as well. So I want to bring this back after the break. We're going to keep talking about coaching. We're going to keep talking about what we've seen this year on the WTA and ATP tours. Stick with us on Open Era. Welcome back to the Open Era podcast, here with Mert Ertunga, tennis coach extraordinaire, probably someone that I've wanted to get on this show for a long time, but he's here now. Let's talk about today and the current juncture of sport, because I think tennis has had some rapid changes and we've had some rapid changes this year. But if you're going to look back at 2022, is there something that sticks out the most for you? Is there something that kind of steals the headlines? Because I mean, there's been a lot of them.
Yeah, it's going to come across a bit gloomy doomy, but I do find that this year 2022 is the kind of year that shows maybe what that kind of confirms, maybe looking back a couple of years, what WTA could have been, and it's not. Mm-hmm. And, back in 2019, 2020, I had this dream that there was going to be a leading quartet of women led by Bianca Andreescu, Ashley Barty, Naomi Osaka, and Iga Swiatek, followed by, Anisimova, Simona Halep, Pliskova, Muhova, Kasatkina, Serena Williams, of course, at the time I was thinking would still be playing. And I thought that would have been a great nucleus of players, and it would catapult WTA to its heights that it's never seen before, especially with those four. Barty with the first of all, in terms of geography, where they're located, right. Those players come from, and the attraction they have for their markets, and also their game styles, right? I mean, Andreescu, Barty, Osaka, and Swiatek are four players that offer a wide variety, a wide plethora of strokes and game plans. And I thought women's tennis would be fantastic by 2022. And lo and behold, Barty retires. Osaka is nowhere where she was back then. Swiatek is holding up her end of the bargain. She's the one bright spot. But Andreescu suffered a lot of injuries. And I thought these four players are very entertaining to watch. And then Serena retires. Muhova goes through a series of injuries. Yes, you have Coco Gauff with a great surgeons. Also, there's the rise of Ons Jabeur and Badosa, for example. There's a nice resurgence by Caroline Garcia, but I just don't. I think it's. I'm sad that WTA hasn't had a better 2022. Compared to what we were expecting 2 years ago.
How important do you think that is, though? Because I definitely follow your line of thinking, and I think Iga, especially during the run and the win streak, there was some noise generated beside that, which I think is positive for the sport in general. It kind of subsided though, and I think it returned with Serena saying, "I'm going to leave at the end of the U.S. Open," and there was that coverage that we would like to see. But the fact that Naomi is seemingly not 100% in on tennis, which I can understand as well. It's not bleak, but it's grim, and I can totally understand where you're coming from.
And I think yes, Devang, it's not people like us that are. We're going to follow. Yeah. I mean, we're going to follow tournaments no matter what.
We'll keep watching.
You and I are going to watch tournaments every week. We're not going to miss a beat. It doesn't matter who's there or not. But I think in terms of attracting new fans in, and reaching the wide audience, because the audience numbers, I think, thrive with your casual viewer watching tennis more often. And we're not in the majority of tennis viewers, people like you and I. The majority are those who chime in the big tournaments, in the majors, from the quarterfinals on and everything. And I think if you have a great nucleus of players that they keep seeing over and over again at that time, then they develop more of an interest and they become more like us. And that's the trend that you would like to see. And I think that trend went backward a little bit, in 2022. So that's what I'm trying to get to. Not that I thoroughly enjoyed WTA this
right,
year.
Right.
I mean, I love this group of players too.
We've had two massive departures this year, Serena and Roger. I'm curious what they meant to you, because I think I've tried to wax poetically about this, and I find myself losing the words, because they literally were the people I grew up with and the people that I kind of envisioned as the vanguards of the sport and people I loved as a fan. But how does this chapter ending feel for you?
Yeah, it's a more of a, I felt that way. I felt the way you feel back in the late 80s when, people I grew up with, such as Borg, retired in the early 80s. Then McEnroe got, throughout the 80s he survived. So did Connors. But then you had new players, Lendl, Edberg, Becker. But then in the beginning of 90s, you had this situation where Edberg and McEnroe, Connors all went away. And you had Sampras and Agassi. Agassi was exciting. Sampras was not so exciting. He was a great player. But, I felt that way in the beginning of the 90s a little bit. I kind of got out of it thinking, I'm not getting the same excitement as I was getting during the years that I was watching. So I could completely see where you're coming from. But I think a player like Roger in retirement will be just as impactful on the game. Exactly. And so will Novak and Rafa too when they retire. I think their impact on tennis will remain even after they retired. In fact, I'd argue that Roger's retirement this weekend may have added fans to tennis. Right. The Laver Cup is a great product to promote tennis. Do I particularly like it myself? No, I don't sit and watch Laver Cup every match. I mean, I'd rather watch an ATP tournament. I'll be quite honest. But
we're watching Moselle. We're watching Moselle and Metz. Yeah.
Yes, but there's no denying what Laver Cup brings to the table. The amount of fans that it generates, it's incredible.
I think the biggest difference as well is that Pete and Andre were pretty close to the vest. Like, you would not really get anything out of them. And I think these guys are not like that. And they love the sport to a level where they want to be there, which I don't think was the case for that generation, which you were mentioning. And that's a huge change.
That's a great point. I didn't think of in those terms, but you are completely right. Yes. And also, but about Serena, I think Serena's retirement is a hit for the WTA. And I think a bigger hit this year was Barty's retirement, because with Serena's retirement,
underrated,
and I there's no denying that Serena is a much bigger figure than any other current women's tennis player today. But at the same time, I think everyone expected Serena to retire within a year or two, but Barty, you're looking at someone who could be in major rivalries for the next 10 years to come, and she's gone.
So I've said this several times on this show. She's coming back next year.
Yeah, I know. I heard you.
She's obviously coming back.
And I'm like, yes, back. Say it again. Maybe it'll happen.
I wanted to ask you about, obviously, these huge names, Federer, Serena, but people that we've watched for many years who are also hanging it up. Joely Tsonga and Sam Querrey, kind of to get back into the tennis nerd lexicon and the fact that we're watching every week. But these are people that I watched every week, and these are people I lived and died with on every point, and I feel like their loss, or their hanging it up, is also a signature.
Yeah, it is, especially in the case of Tsonga. Tsonga, for the longest time, at least by French fans and a lot of European fans, was regarded as the one out of that group of French players who was most likely to win a major, or maybe move up to have had the potential to become number one. And after that great final against Novak Djokovic, back in 2008, I believe, in the Australian Open. I mean, he beat Nadal like a drum in the semifinals. Nobody, if you could tell 100 tennis fans at that time, this guy will never reach the final of a major again, nobody would have believed you. And he never did. But at the same time, he was a lot of fun to watch. I wanted to watch Tsonga every time he played, and I liked his game, big serve, and he did record some great wins. He recorded some great tournaments. It's true that that Tsonga fans will probably be disappointed overall in his career, but I felt like Tsonga was an inspiration to a lot of players and an inspiration to a lot of kids in France and in francophone countries who wanted to pick up the racket and get into the world of tennis. I'm not sure I can really say the same for Sam Querrey, though, in all fairness.
I think now in hindsight, Sam Querrey's escape from Russia might be the most poignant moment. And also he beat Novak in a big tournament as well. But
that's right. Yes. In the casual fans' eyes, you are right. Those two events was when he was in the spotlight. Yeah.
I think Joe Willie is a great example of expectations measuring or what we consider as achieving the biggest things you can achieve, especially in this sport where it's not marginalized, but it's taken to the slams or what it means to be a successful competitor. But all of those, I mean, Richard Gasquet is still playing, and seemingly and because he loves the sport, right? And Gail as well. And I think I can't denigrate that at all. And it's not against the successor records, right? This is just about loving the sport.
For sure. And even in record, all of us and 90% of ATP players out there would love to have Tsonga's career at this point. Right. So that's it's all perspective.
I was reading on your blog, Mert, about Felix versus Chapo a year ago at the Australian Open. And I thought it was fascinating to read it now because I've made some judgments on both of these people going forward. And I thought what you talked about in terms of their game plans and like what they wanted to do and how mature they were and how basically their entire career has been leading up to this point. And I think that's the case for a lot of these youngsters where the plan is in place and it's not a freestyle kind of thing. Like they're clearly locked in what they're trying to do. I don't know if Felix or Chapo in 2022 have that same game plan. I'm curious, what do you think about their evolution?
Yeah, I think in terms of, I think for Dennis, this has been a rough time, lately for sure. Let's say the last 12 months. And but I think with Dennis, if you're a Dennis fan and you're expecting a continuous rise from him, a la Rainer Schüttler of the 90s.
I needed a Rainer Schüttler shout out, by the way. Thank you.
Yeah, that's right. It'll be the only mention of him, right? But that's it won't. Dennis is not that guy. I think Shapovalov will have great sequence of tournaments followed by maybe horrendous scores for
Peaks
a while.
And valleys.
So, exactly, peaks and valleys, and of course I'm dramatizing using the words horrendous, but he's going peaks and valleys is the right way to go, and so I would the only thing I can recommend Shapovalov fans is to remain patient. He'll have another good streak coming. For his game, I thought he was on the right track in 2019, 2020, especially the time that he was with Yuzhny. He was starting to come in a lot more, even serving and volleying some. And I don't think I don't think his best option is to stay back and hit 200 miles an hour ground strokes and try to hit winners. He can do that, but he needs to play an all court game. And I thought he was starting to do that. So I'm a little bit baffled myself with that string of losses that he suffered. But I still have faith in his game. I think that he can get it back together again. And maybe he needs he needs to get together with someone who game plan for him is super important. He's got one of the best serves, one of the best lefty serves I've seen in the last 15 years. He can really bring it out wide. He can go down the middle. And his second shot, the serve plus one, the 1-2 punch, so to speak, that's when he needs to, in my opinion, look to come in more behind that second shot instead of going for the straight out winner.
I think bringing Yushny back as well is a sign that I think they acknowledge they got it wrong when he wasn't around, right?
Yeah, I agree. That was a good move, and because for sure he was a more how do I say this? He was a more reserved, crazy player.
Right.
When he was, and that's. But you also don't want to change your tennis ID. You don't.
Right.
You cannot
Right.
expect someone like Shapovalov to play to get four
Constrained.
balls in play first and then go for the
He's
winner.
not a constrained guy.
No, that's you take him out of his tennis personality, he's going to make more mistakes than he even was before. So I feel like that's the right move. For Felix, he's a bit of a more steady person in terms of improving his game. I still think that Felix's biggest I don't want to say weakness, but maybe his Achilles is those guys who just send every ball back deep by the baseline and make him hit several balls, 8 or 10 balls, without getting to step inside the baseline. He's great when he gets to step inside the baseline.
Did you read anything into that Laver Cup match between Felix and Novak?
No, I can't really because of Novak's diminished capacity with his ground strokes.
Yeah.
I had because of his wrist. So I had trouble reading much into it. I thought Felix played great. But I don't know if Novak is exactly the kind of player that I feel Auger-Aliassime would have trouble against.
Exactly. A metronome, a Cam Norrie-esque at a slam kind of thing where it's like,
Yes.
I don't know if Felix can withstand the fact that they keep getting balls back. I think that's a great point.
I keep going. I'll give you a great example, although he's much better now than he was back then. But even the 2 matches that he lost to Laszlo Jerry a couple of years back, in a row.
Yeah.
That's when that guy was just sending every ball back deep, nothing flashy, nothing spectacular, making Felix come up with strokes. Felix is a great offensive player, and if he can step inside the baseline, he's deadly.
Mert, we're good on predictions here. Most of them bad. A lot of them bad, actually. Most of the time. But
I join your club. Okay, I'm bad too.
it's no fault of our own. It's a fickle sport. That being said, what do you think is going to be the story of 2023? Is it Iga continuing to be the vanguard of the WTA? Is it Novak returning to the tour and picking up where he left off? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's going to be on the men's side, Novak and Rafa versus Alcaraz and
The
Sinner.
field. Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
I think I think those Alcaraz and Sinner are poised to become the next two big guns. I know there are a lot of Tsitsipas fans out there. I'm one of them, and but at the same time, Tsitsipas is going to have to find a way to stay in rallies with those guys.
Mert, tell me this though. As a vanguard of the one-handed backhand, this is clearly a problem. This is clearly a problem. It almost fed like.
Yeah, it's one-handed backhand is. You mean it's a problem in terms of staying in the rally with these guys?
And his return is not nearly good enough.
I'm sorry. You're talking about Tsitsipas. Yes. No. You're right. You're right. For him, and also he was. I felt that it took a long time to develop a slice. He's stuck. I mean, I'm not saying that he should use the slice all the time, but you want to have that in your toolbox, even if you're not using it much. And now he's starting to use it a lot more, and it's gotten a lot better. But I think it took a little too long. I would have liked to see it maybe more a couple of years back already. And he's stuck with the topspin. His serve needs to work well. His forehand needs to work well, and he can stay with those guys. And if we're talking about potential, and improvement potential, Tsitsipas is a step ahead, I feel, than the other guys. But I think the other guys are. You look at Sinner's rallying speed, footwork.
His movement is phenomenal.
It's phenomenal compared to 2 years ago, and he was already pretty good 2 years ago. But now, I mean, he's rallying. He's nailing balls to the deep to the baseline, to the sidelines, and running and nailing it the other way. And he's doing that with consistency, 16, 17 balls in a row. I mean, Alcaraz and Sinner are really, really tough, and they're not just baseline hitters either. Alcaraz can drop shot.
Right.
Sinner can hit an angle forehand. These guys got it.
I guess My other thought of this post-Laver Cup world is, I think they all the big three, the big four, if you want to call it that, they all acknowledge that this time has passed. I wonder if these guys are ready to take the mantle and move forward and push tennis to a different, maybe not a different stratosphere, but keeping it up in general conversation, because I think that's what Roger and Serena did, and I really hope they do. But also, that seems like a lot to ask of them.
Yeah, I think to do that, you need repeated rivalries in the semifinals and finals of majors. If you look back at men's tennis or women's tennis, they were most popular when you had repeated rivalries. Martina and Chris, Borg and McEnroe, Pete Sampras and Andre, and when you had repeated rivals, Steffi Graf and Monica Seles. When you had that kind of repeated rivals at the top. And I think with these guys, this is possible. But this is why, once again, I'm saying, it's going to be Novak and Rafa versus these two guys, or possibly Tsitsipas and Medvedev. You can't forget those two guys either. Right. But it's going to be that, because you look at this year, Devang, Rafa and Novak still swept the majors, if you really think about it. Yeah, I mean,
they're pretty good.
They're pretty. So they're not done. They're not. I can't really call past the mantle already 2023, maybe 2024. But let's see what happens next year. I mean, what Rafa did this year was crazy.
My favorite Laver Cup moment was when Novak was peaking against Tiafoe, and there was nothing they could say. Like, what kind of advice do you give to someone who's clearly at the peak of his powers and still very good?
Have you noticed the guys coaching on the sideline no longer coach? They were just simply throwing out phrases of praise for Novak.
General praise. I wanted, before we end.
Yes.
One of my favorite tweets of all time is Mert's Grand Slam versus Majors tweet. So I want to give you the platform to reiterate the difference and why this matters.
Well, okay. Here's welcome to my TED talk for but basically the part that really gets me there is I'm okay with calling majors slams or maybe even another word. But people need to know that winning a Grand Slam is winning the 4 majors in the same year. Right. And there's no need to replace one term in tennis with a term that already exists to represent something else in tennis.
As someone who I think I've done this myself, but now realizing the error of my ways, you're right.
Well, everybody does it, right? Even the thing is, it's become so common that even I think ATP and WTA's maybe younger website guys who are doing the website, they even use those. But again, I'm okay with saying, when you want something to wipe your nose with, it's okay to say, give me a Kleenex, even if there's not a Kleenex around in another brand. But to call a major a Grand Slam is basically using one term that already exists in tennis for another. And it's just, I think a guy like Rod Laver, I wonder what he thinks when he hears that some people won, 14 Grand Slams, 20 Grand Slams. He busted his butt to win one in 1969, in the Open era.
You're right. I'm glad. I just want this to be known.
Yeah, no, I know. Somebody called me the godfather of this, but yeah, when you win all 4 majors, when you win all 4 majors in one year, that's called a Grand Slam. Historians will agree with me, but Bud Collins to Steve Flink to everybody will agree with me on that one. They will take my side.
I love it, sir. Thank you so much. Please come back.
Thank you. Oh, I would love to. I'd love to. Big fan of you guys, like I said.
Amazing. Mert Ertunga, he is on Twitter at Murtov's Desk, probably the best tennis-related follow, I think, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Someone who approaches the game with levity, but also the sincerity that it's lacking sometimes. Sir, thanks so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
There you have it. An interview with the coach, Mert Ertunga. He will come back. I hope so. A fantastic guest. Insight that I was welcoming, but also a bit surprised by. in the sense that I think when we watch the sport so much and we dedicate hours and hours to maybe the minutia of what goes on, you miss some things. And it's always helpful to have a friend talk about things that you might have missed and things that you should recollect and talk about. That is this episode of Open Era. Thanks as always. If you do like our show or like what we do, please join us on patreon.com/openerapod. Join us there, get the show ad free, get it early. Plus join us on the Discord where we're chatting tennis all the time. If you could also do that and then give us a rating on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast, because that would be wonderful as well. And in the hopes of getting this tennis podcast into more people's ears. For producer Greg and Simon, thank you so much for listening to the Open Era Pod. We'll talk to you next week.